A pregnant woman collapses in the middle of her own divorce hearing. The air is sucked out of the oak-paneled courtroom. But her husband, the man she built a life with, doesn't move a muscle. His beautiful younger mistress simply smirks from the gallery, a picture of smug victory. They think they've won. They think they've broken her, and are moments away from taking everything. But they have no idea about the single sealed envelope the judge is holding. A DNA test that won't just reveal the father of the baby, but will unravel a lie that has built an entire empire. The air in courtroom 4B was thick with a toxic blend of antiseptic cleaner and silent animosity. It clung to the heavy wooden benches and seeped into the fabric of Jessica Collins's maternity dress, making her feel suffocated. At 7 months pregnant, every sensation was amplified: the unrelenting hardness of the bench against her spine, the low-frequency hum of the fluorescent lights, and most of all, the piercing stare of her husband Daniel from across the room. He sat beside his lawyer, a shark in a $1,000 suit named Robert Peterson. Daniel was the picture of calm, composed control. His jaw was set, his shoulders were back, and his custom-tailored suit looked like it had been molded to his athletic frame. He was handsome, devastatingly so, and he was using that charm as a weapon, offering the judge a placid, reasonable expression that masked the monster beneath. Jessica's gaze, however, was unwillingly drawn past him to the first row of the public gallery. There sat Victoria Beaumont. She was everything Jessica wasn't right now. Young, slender, with hair the color of spun gold, and a predatory stillness. She wore a tight crimson dress that was both wildly inappropriate for a courtroom and a deliberate screaming statement of her victory. And she was smiling. It wasn't a broad, joyful smile. It was a small, sharp, knowing smirk that was aimed directly at Jessica, a tiny, vicious twist of her painted lips. That smile said, "I have him. I have his future. I'm sitting where you should be, and soon I'll have your money too." "Mrs. Collins," her own lawyer. Olivia Chen whispered, her voice a sharp anchor in the swirling vortex of Jessica's nausea. "Focus. Judge Atwood is speaking." Jessica blinked, forcing herself to look at the woman on the bench. Judge Margaret Atwood was in her late 50s, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for being as tough as she was fair. She peered over her spectacles, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Peterson," the judge said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your client, Mr. Collins, is contesting paternity of the unborn child, and is therefore petitioning to have all marital assets frozen, pending a full forensic accounting under the assumption of marital infidelity on the part of Mrs. Collins. Is that a correct summary of your motion?" "It is, Your Honor," Peterson said, rising smoothly. "My client has significant reason to believe he is not the biological father of the child Mrs. Collins is carrying. He has been a faithful and dedicated husband, and this revelation has been a source of profound emotional and personal distress." A bitter, hysterical laugh almost escaped Jessica's throat. "Faithful's dedicated." The words were so absurd, so diametrically opposed to the reality of the past year that she felt a wave of dizziness. She gripped the edge of her table, her knuckles turning white. She could feel the baby kick a small, insistent flutter against her ribs, as if he too could sense the injustice. "And what is this significant reason, Mr. Peterson?" Judge Atwood asked, her tone laced with skepticism. "Mr. Collins will testify that Mrs. Collins's behavior became erratic and secretive in the months leading up to the alleged conception. She was distant, often away from home for unexplained periods. He is heartbroken to conclude that she must have sought comfort elsewhere." It was a masterclass in slander, delivered with a somber, regretful tone. Jessica looked at Daniel, pleading with her eyes for him to stop this, to show an ounce of the decency she once believed he possessed. He met her gaze for a half-second, and his eyes were not angry or sad. They were chillingly empty. He was a stranger. Olivia Chen stood up. "Your Honor, this is a baseless and despicable accusation. It is nothing more than a cruel tactic by Mr. Collins to avoid his financial and parental responsibilities. My client, Jessica Collins, has been a loyal wife and partner for 8 years. She put her own career as a promising architect on hold to support Mr. Collins as he built his real estate empire. These allegations are pure fiction designed to humiliate her and deny his child his birthright. The proof, as they say, will be in the pudding," Peterson countered smugly. "We have formally requested a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. If Mrs. Collins has nothing to hide, she should have no objection." From the gallery, Victoria's smirk widened. This was their checkmate. They knew Jessica had no money of her own. Daniel had made sure of that, systematically cutting off her access to their joint accounts the day he served her with divorce papers. They were banking on her being too poor, too broken, and too ashamed to fight. They thought they could slander her name, steal her future, and leave her with nothing but a child they would label a bastard. "My client has already consented to the test, Your Honor." Olivia set her voice firm and clear. "The results were delivered to this court by the lab this morning. We are fully prepared to have them read into the record." A flicker of surprise crossed Peterson's face. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. They hadn't expected this. They had expected a fight delays a tearful refusal that would make her look guilty. They hadn't expected calm, swift compliance. From her seat, Victoria leaned forward almost imperceptibly, her blue eyes fixed on the judge's bench, where a single sealed manila envelope lay. The smile was gone, replaced by an expression of intense, predatory focus. This was the moment. Judge Atwood picked up the envelope. Her gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on Jessica, then on Daniel, and finally on Victoria. "The court has in its possession the results of the DNA analysis comparing samples from the fetus and Mr. Daniel Collins." The silence was absolute. Jessica's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet hall. She knew the truth, of course, but the sheer audacity of Daniel's lie had planted a seed of terror in her mind. What if something went wrong? What if they'd somehow tampered with the results? Her world had been upended so completely that anything felt possible. She chanced one last look at Victoria. The blonde was no longer looking at the judge. She was looking directly at Jessica again, and as the judge began to tear open the seal on the envelope, Victoria's lips curved back into that same vicious, triumphant smile. It was the smile that broke her. It was the final crushing weight of the cruelty, the gaslighting, the utter betrayal. The smug certainty of the woman who had stolen her husband her life and was now enjoying the spectacle of her complete and utter destruction. The room began to tilt. The judge's voice became a distant, echoing boom. Black spots danced in Jessica's vision, coalescing at the edges. She felt the baby give another sharp kick, a final urgent warning. Her hand, which had been gripping the table, slipped. She made a small, gasping sound, trying to draw in a breath that wouldn't come. Olivia turned, her professional composure vanishing, replaced by alarm. "Jessica?" But Jessica couldn't answer. The floor rushed up to meet her as the world dissolved into a silent, suffocating darkness. Her last conscious thought was of that smile burned into her mind like a brand. The pregnant woman had fainted in court, and the mistress was still smiling. 8 years ago, the world had been a kaleidoscope of brilliant color. Jessica remembered the exact shade of blue in Daniel's eyes, the day he proposed to her on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Pacific. He'd dropped to one knee, the wind whipping his dark hair, and presented her with a ring that wasn't ostentatious, but elegant and perfect, just like he seemed to be. He'd spoken of a future built together, a partnership, a legacy. She a rising star at a prestigious architectural firm, and he a junior vice president at his father's lucrative real estate development company, Collins & Son Properties. "We'll build an empire, Jess," he had said, his voice filled with a sincerity that she had clung to like a life raft. "You design the world, and I'll build it." The first few years were idyllic, a carefully curated montage of success. Jessica's innovative designs won accolades, and Daniel, with his sharp business acumen and ruthless ambition, climbed the corporate ladder with astonishing speed. They bought a beautiful glass-walled house in the hills, a testament to her design philosophy and his financial success. Their life was the envy of their friends, a perfect couple, a perfect home, a perfect future stretching out before them. The shift was subtle at first, a slow cooling she barely registered. After his father, Arthur Collins, passed away from a sudden heart attack 4 years into their marriage, Daniel inherited the entire company. The weight of being the sole son in Collins & Son Properties changed him. The ambition that had once been exhilarating became something harder, more obsessive. "The board is pushing for a more aggressive quarter," he'd say, coming home long after she'd gone to bed. "I have to be there. Dad built this from nothing. I can't be the one to let it falter." Jessica, ever the supportive wife, took him at his word. She scaled back her own projects, telling herself it was temporary. She started managing their home-hosting dinner parties for his business associates, and becoming the gracious, smiling woman on the arm of the brilliant CEO. She was playing a part, she realized one day, and she'd forgotten how to leave the stage. Her drafting table gathered dust in the home office he had slowly co-opted for his own paperwork. The late nights became more frequent. The business trips stretched from 2 days to 5. When he was home, he was distant, his phone a permanent extension of his hand angled away from her with a new reflexive secrecy. The easy intimacy they once shared evaporated, replaced by a polite, formal distance. He would compliment her dress, but his eyes wouldn't really see her. He would ask about her day, but would be scrolling through emails before she could answer. The first concrete crack in her denial came 6 months before the divorce papers. It was an earring. A single diamond and sapphire drop earring nestled deep in the passenger seat cushion of his car. It wasn't hers. Jessica's style was minimalist modern. This was expensive, flashy, and utterly foreign. When she confronted him holding the glittering jewel in her trembling palm, he didn't even flinch. He laughed. "Oh, that," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Robert Peterson's wife, Melinda, was in the car last week. We were coming back from that charity gala. It must be hers. I'll have my assistant send it back to her." He was so smooth, so plausible, that for a moment she almost believed him. But there was a coldness in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a flicker of something calculating and contemptuous. He wasn't just lying. He was insulted that she'd even dared to ask. He was gaslighting her, making her feel foolish and paranoid for noticing the evidence of his betrayal. That night, for the first time in their marriage, he slept in the guest room. He said he had an early conference call and didn't want to wake her. The gulf between them had become a chasm. Then came the discovery that shattered everything. He was in the shower, and his phone, usually guarded like a state secret, buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. A name flashed on the screen, Victoria B. A string of messages followed one after the other, each one a dagger in Jessica's heart. "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. That stuffy old house must feel like a prison. You belong with me. When are you finally going to leave her? You promised. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. She scrolled up her hands, shaking so badly she could barely control her thumb. There were months of messages. Pictures. Victoria blonde and laughing on a boat that Jessica recognized as Daniel's. Victoria, in a slinky dress, at a restaurant Jessica had wanted to try for their anniversary, an anniversary Daniel had claimed he had to miss for a business trip to Singapore. Victoria wrapped in what looked like Daniel's hotel bathrobe, a skyline Jessica didn't recognize behind her. The betrayal was so absolute, so extensive, it felt like a physical blow. It wasn't a fling. It was a whole other life. He was living a life from which she had been completely and deliberately excluded. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. An icy calm settled over her. When he walked out of the bathroom, a towel slung around his waist, she was sitting on the bed, his phone in her hand. The mask of the devoted husband fell away instantly. There was no apology, no remorse. There was only annoyance, as if she had committed the ultimate transgression by uncovering his secret. "You went through my phone," he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Who is she, Daniel?" "It's none of your business," he snarled, snatching the phone from her. "This is what happens when you get paranoid and insecure, Jess. You go looking for trouble, and you find it." The argument that followed was the ugliest of her life. He twisted everything, turning his infidelity into her failure. She was too focused on her hobby of architecture. She wasn't spontaneous enough. She didn't support his ambitions. She'd let herself go. Each word was a calculated strike, designed to shatter her self-worth. It was during that fight, in a moment of pure, desperate defiance, that she told him she was pregnant. They had been trying for over a year with no success. She had found out only 2 weeks prior, and had been waiting for the perfect moment to tell him, hoping it would be the good news that could heal the growing rift between them. She watched his face, praying for a flicker of the man she had married. For a moment she saw something. Shock, confusion. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. "Pregnant," he repeated the word, tasting like poison in his mouth. He looked her up and down, his eyes filled with a terrifying new suspicion. "And you're telling me this now?" 2 days later, she was served with divorce papers. The grounds were irreconcilable differences. And 2 weeks after that, the amended petition arrived. He was formally denying paternity and accusing her of adultery. He had taken the most beautiful secret of her life and twisted it into the ugliest of weapons to be used against her. He wasn't just leaving her. He was trying to erase her, to rewrite their history, and paint her as the villain, leaving him and his beautiful mistress free to live the life they had stolen. The gilded cage had become a torture chamber, and Daniel was holding the key, intent on locking her in forever. Jessica woke to the sharp, sterile smell of rubbing alcohol and the rhythmic beep of a machine next to her head. A soft, gentle hand was stroking her hair. She pried her heavy eyelids open to see Olivia Chen's face, etched with concern. "Hey," Olivia said softly. "You're at the courthouse infirmary. You fainted. You gave us all a scare." The courtroom, the smirk, the envelope. It all came rushing back, and Jessica tried to sit up, a panicked gasp escaping her. "The results. Did the judge read them?" "Shh, easy," Olivia soothed gently, pushing her back down onto the stiff cot. The judge called a recess immediately. She postponed the reading. She was more concerned about you and the baby. The paramedics checked you both out. Your blood pressure is high and you're dehydrated, but the baby's heartbeat is strong. You're both fighters. Relief washed over Jessica, so potent it felt like weakness. It was a temporary reprieve, a pause button on her public execution. He didn't even look at me, did he? Jessica whispered, the memory of Daniel's frozen posture clear in her mind. When I fell. He didn't move. Olivia's expression tightened. No, Jessica. He didn't. His lawyer and the other woman, they looked annoyed at the delay. That's all. The cruelty of it was a fresh wound. It solidified a truth that had been slowly dawning on her. The Daniel she had loved was gone, or perhaps had never truly existed at all. The man in that courtroom was a predator, and she was his prey. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. Daniel, through his lawyer, played his hand with brutal efficiency. Citing the stress of the ongoing litigation and uncertainty, he successfully filed an emergency motion to freeze all their joint assets. The credit cards Jessica used for groceries were declined. The automatic payment for her car lease was rejected. She received an eviction notice from the condo Daniel had rented for her after kicking her out of their marital home, a sterile, soulless place he was now legally no longer paying for. He was strangling her financially, trying to force her into a quick, cheap settlement where she would sign away her rights for pennies on the dollar just to survive. It was a siege. He was starving her out. Jessica spent a frantic afternoon on the phone with her parents, a retired teacher and a librarian in Ohio. They were horrified, of course, and immediately wired her what they could from their modest savings. It was enough to keep a roof over her head and food in the fridge for a month, maybe 2, but the shame burned. She was 34 years old, a once successful architect, now completely dependent on her parents' retirement fund. It was during a tearful call with her younger sister Megan, a fiercely practical nurse, that the spark of defiance was reignited. "You can't let him do this, Jess," Megan said, her voice steely with anger. "He's not just divorcing you, he's trying to destroy you. You can't just defend yourself. You have to fight back. There has to be something. Men like Daniel, men with that much ego and money, they always have secrets. You just have to find the right stone to turn over." Hanging up the phone, Jessica looked around the generic beige-walled condo. It was a prison designed by her husband. She thought of her baby, of the life she wanted to give him, a life free from the shadow of this monstrous man. Megan was right. She couldn't play defense anymore. Daniel had started this war, but she was going to finish it. The next day, she walked into Olivia Chen's office with a new fire in her eyes. Olivia, a sharp, impeccably dressed woman in her early 40s, had taken the case pro bono after a mutual friend had made the introduction, moved by the injustice of Jessica's situation. "He's trying to bleed me dry," Jessica said, her voice devoid of the quavering fear it had held before. "He thinks if he makes me desperate enough, I'll sign anything. He's wrong." Olivia leaned forward, a pen poised over a legal pad. "I agree. A defensive strategy isn't going to cut it. We know the paternity test will prove the baby is his. That will get you child support. But to get a fair settlement, to get what you are owed for 8 years of marriage and professional sacrifice, we need leverage. He's hidden his money, I'm sure of it. Shell corporations, offshore accounts. It's a classic rich man's divorce playbook." "We need a forensic accountant," Jessica stated. "We do," Olivia confirmed. "A good one. But they're expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars just to start." Jessica's heart sank. It was money she didn't have. "So what do we do?" Olivia tapped her pen for a long moment, her eyes narrowed in thought. "We can petition the court to have Daniel's assets pay for the accountant, arguing it's a necessary expense for discovery. With his public slander of you, Judge Atwood might be inclined to grant it. But it's not a guarantee. We need something else. Something personal. You were married to him for 8 years, Jessica. You lived in that house, you saw his business dealings up close. Think, was there anything that ever struck you as odd? Anything he was intensely private about. Jessica closed her eyes, forcing herself to walk back through the memories, pushing past the pain, and looking for details. She thought about his office, the one she was never allowed to enter when he was working. The locked file cabinet in the corner. His obsessive privacy about his family history. Daniel's father, Arthur Collins, had been a hard, domineering man who had built the company from scratch. His mother, Eleanor, was a quiet, nervous woman who seemed to live in her husband's shadow. Eleanor and Daniel had a strained, almost non-existent relationship. After Arthur's death, Eleanor had moved to a retirement community in Florida and cut off contact with her son almost entirely. Jessica had only met her a handful of times, and the woman had always seemed afraid. His mother, Jessica said slowly, her eyes snapping open. Eleanor, they don't speak. After his father died, she just vanished from his life. He always said she was fragile and couldn't handle the stress of his world. But there was a time at Arthur's funeral. She said something strange to me. What did she say? Olivia pressed, leaning in. We were at the reception. Daniel was holding court, accepting condolences like he was accepting an award. Eleanor grabbed my arm. She looked terrified. She whispered, "He's not like his father. Thank God for that. Arthur had a cruel heart, but Daniel has a hole where his heart should be. Be careful, my dear. The foundation of this house is built on a lie." Olivia's pen stopped moving. The foundation of this house is built on a lie. What did you think she meant? At the time, I thought she was just a grieving, rambling widow. I thought this house meant the family, their emotional state. But she was looking at the portrait of Arthur on the wall when she said it. The official company portrait. What if she meant the company Collins & Son? A thrilling, dangerous idea began to form. What if the lie wasn't just marital? What if it was older, bigger? Olivia, Jessica said, her voice trembling with the audacity of her thought. The paternity test for our baby. It compares the baby's DNA to Daniel's. What if we could compare Daniel's DNA to his father's? Olivia stared at her, her sharp legal mind instantly processing the implications. Arthur Collins is deceased. How could we get a sample? When he had his first heart attack 2 years before he died, he was treated at St. Jude's Medical Center. They did extensive tests, biopsies. They would still have his tissue samples in their pathology archives, Jessica remembered. I signed some of the paperwork for his admission. It was a long shot, a wild, improbable stab in the dark based on the cryptic words of a frightened old woman. But it was the first stone, and Jessica had a sudden gut-wrenching certainty that if she could just turn it over, the entire rotten foundation of Daniel's world would come crumbling down. Getting a judge to sign a subpoena for the medical records of a dead man based on the cryptic utterance of an estranged mother was a monumental task. Robert Peterson fought it with everything he had, calling it a disgusting, ghoulish fishing expedition and a desperate attempt by a scorned woman to harass a grieving son. In the preliminary hearing, he was slick and condescending. Your Honor, Mrs. Collins is clearly unwell. She fainted in court. Now she comes to you with this conspiracy theory pulled from a soap opera. She wants to desecrate the memory of Arthur Collins, a titan of this city, all to distract from her own infidelity. But Olivia Chen was his match. She stood before Judge Atwood, her presence calm and commanding. Your Honor, Olivia argued, the entire premise of Mr. Collins's case against my client rests on a question of blood of lineage. He has publicly and callously questioned the parentage of his own unborn child to gain a financial advantage. He has made genetics the central theme of this divorce. All we are asking is to apply that same standard of scrutiny to the lineage that grants him his own immense wealth and power. She let that hang in the air for a moment. Collins & Son Properties is a family business passed from father to son. The vast majority of Mr. Collins's personal wealth is tied up in a family trust, a trust whose charter I am sure is predicated on direct biological succession. If Mr. Collins believes parentage is so critically important when it comes to his responsibilities, shouldn't it be equally important when it comes to his privileges? We are not desecrating a memory, Your Honor. We are seeking the whole truth in a case where my opponent has been content to deal only in slanderous half-truths. Judge Atwood listened. Her fingers steepled her eyes, unreadable. She looked from Olivia's earnest face to Peterson's indignant one. She looked at Daniel, who sat rigid with fury. Then she looked at Jessica, who met her gaze without flinching. "Motion granted," the judge said, her voice flat. "St. Jude's Medical Center will be subpoenaed for any and all biological materials belonging to the deceased Arthur Collins. The lab will run a Y chromosome STR analysis comparing the samples of Arthur Collins to Daniel Collins. The results will be delivered directly to this court and will be read along with the results of the prenatal paternity test when we reconvene." She struck her gavel once. "This court is adjourned." The victory was intoxicating but terrifying. Jessica and Olivia had pushed the button. Now they had to live with the consequences, whatever they might be. While they waited for the new court date and the lab results, they went to work. Olivia managed to get the court to approve the forensic accountant, arguing that Daniel's own challenge to the child's legitimacy made a full accounting essential. The man they hired was a quiet, balding genius named Michael Finch, who spoke of spreadsheets and ledgers with the passion of a poet. "The money is the ghost in the machine," he told Jessica during their first meeting in Olivia's small conference room. "It's never really gone. It just changes shape, moves through walls. My job is to find its shadow." For days, Jessica sat with Michael, piecing together the financial skeleton of her marriage. She brought him old bank statements she'd found, recalled names of business partners, and described trips Daniel had taken. It was painstaking, emotionally draining work. Every credit card statement was a map of Daniel's secret life with Victoria. A charge for a $5,000 necklace from a jeweler in New York. A $7,500 charge for a weekend at a luxury spa in Napa. A $10,000 wire transfer to a bank in the Cayman Islands with the memo, V. Beaumont, design consultation. "This is her," Jessica said, her finger tracing the name on the statement. "Victoria Beaumont. She's an interior designer. He must have claimed he was hiring her for a project." Michael typed furiously. "A tale as old as time. Inflated invoices, phantom consultation fees. It's a classic way to move marital assets to a third party before a divorce. It's traceable, but messy." While Michael chased the money, Jessica tried to chase the other ghost, Eleanor Collins. She found the number for the retirement community in Boca Raton. The first 3 times she called Eleanor hung up the moment she heard Jessica's voice. On the 4th try, Jessica spoke quickly, a torrent of words before the click of the receiver. "Eleanor, please don't hang up. It's Jessica. Daniel is trying to take my baby. He's telling the court that his son isn't his. He's trying to leave me with nothing. You told me the foundation of the house was built on a lie. Please, I need to know what you meant. I'm fighting for my child's future." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, filled only with the faint, crackling static of a long-distance call. Jessica could hear the shaky, shallow breaths of the older woman. "He was always such a cold boy," Eleanor finally whispered, her voice frail as old parchment. "Even as a child. He didn't get that from me. He got that from Arthur, or the man I let him believe was his father." Jessica's heart stopped. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" Another long pause. "Arthur was a sterile man." Eleanor said the words coming out in a pained rush, a confession she had held for over 40 years. "An illness as a young man. He could never have children, but he needed an heir. His ego, his pride. The son in Collins and Son had to exist. It was his obsession. He was a cruel man, Jessica. He arranged it. Arranged what? Jessica breathed, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles ached. He found a donor, a young man at the university. Smart, healthy. It was all very clinical. Anonymous. Arthur made me. He forced me to go through with it. It was a business transaction to him. The price of my comfortable life was to produce his heir. I was young, and I was terrified of him. I did what he said. Daniel was born and Arthur claimed him. The young man was paid and he disappeared. No one ever knew. Daniel doesn't know. He believes with all his soul that he is the blood heir to the Collins empire. The world tilted on its axis for the second time in a month. This was the lie. The foundational, earth-shattering lie upon which Daniel had built his entire identity, his arrogance, his entitlement. He worshipped the memory of the father who had built the company, a man who wasn't even his father. Who was the donor? Eleanor. Do you have a name? No, she whimpered. Arthur handled everything. He burned all the records. He said the secret would die with the two of us. I never thought Daniel would become so much like him. The same cruelty, the same need to control everything. After the call, Jessica sat in stunned silence for a full hour. The DNA test wasn't a long shot anymore. It was a ticking time bomb placed directly under Daniel's throne. The day before the court date, Michael Finch called. I found it, he said, a note of triumph in his quiet voice. It's clever, I'll give him that. He set up a blind trust in the British Virgin Islands with Victoria Beaumont as the sole beneficiary upon a triggering event. The triggering event. The finalization of his divorce from you. He's funneled over $15 million into it over the last 8 months. It's almost all of the liquid marital assets. He was planning on leaving you with the house which is mortgaged to the hilt and a mountain of debt. Jessica felt a cold fury. He wasn't just leaving her. He was orchestrating a complete financial annihilation. We have him, don't we? She asked. On the money, yes? Michael confirmed. We can prove fraudulent conveyance. But what you have with this DNA business, that's something else entirely. You're not just going after his money, Mrs. Collins. You're going after his name. And as she prepared for court the next day, Jessica knew that was the entire point. He had tried to steal her child's name and legitimacy. Now she was about to watch as the truth did the exact same thing to him. The atmosphere in courtroom 4B was even more charged than before. The recess had allowed the drama to marinate, and the room was buzzing with a low murmur of anticipation. Reporters sensing a bigger story than a typical high society divorce had taken up a few spots in the back of the gallery. Robert Peterson and Daniel Collins sat at their table projecting an aura of bored impatience, as if this whole affair were a theatrical nuisance they were being forced to endure. Daniel looked immaculate as always, but Jessica noticed a tiny pulsing muscle in his jaw. A tell. He was not as calm as he appeared. The subpoena for his father's medical records had clearly rattled him, an unexpected move that had breached the walls of his carefully constructed fortress. Across the gallery, Victoria Beaumont was back in her seat. Today she wore a sleek black dress, an outfit of mock solemnity. The smug smirk, however, was still firmly in place. To her, this was just the final act of a play where her victory was already scripted. She caught Jessica's eye and gave a subtle, insolent wink. In that moment, Jessica felt not a flicker of pain or intimidation, only a profound, pitying contempt. Victoria thought she was about to become the queen of a vast empire, but she had no idea she was sitting on the edge of a sinkhole. Jessica herself felt transformed. She was no longer the trembling victim who had collapsed on the floor. In the past weeks, she had become a warrior. The fight for her son's future, combined with the earth-shattering secret she now held, had forged a core of steel within her. Her movements were deliberate, her back was straight. She sat beside Olivia Chen, not as a client needing protection, but as a partner in a strategy about to come to fruition. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Atwood entered and took her seat, her face as stern and impassive as ever. She surveyed the room, her gaze resting for a moment on the 2 sealed envelopes on her desk. They seemed to pulsate with the secrets they contained. "We are reconvened in the matter of Collins versus Collins," the judge began, her voice resonating with authority. Before the recess, the court was prepared to read the results of a court-ordered paternity test. Subsequently, the court also ordered a Y chromosome analysis to be performed. The accredited lab has delivered both sets of results, and they have been in the sole possession of this court. I will now unseal them and read them into the official record. A hush fell over the room. It was so quiet, Jessica could hear the soft whirring of the clock on the wall, each tick a countdown to detonation. Judge Atwood picked up the first envelope, the one concerning the paternity of Jessica's baby. She slid a letter opener beneath the flap and unfolded the single sheet of paper within. The silence stretched, becoming taut and unbearable. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his mask of indifference slipping into one of keen interest. Victoria held her breath. Regarding the paternity of the male fetus carried by Mrs. Jessica Collins, the judge read her voice clear and unwavering. The analysis compared the fetal DNA profile to the DNA profile of Mr. Daniel Collins. The results are as follows. The probability of paternity is 99.9999%. She looked up from the paper directly at Daniel. Mr. Collins, according to the state's highest scientific standards, you are the father of this child. A collective exhale swept through the room. Olivia Chen reached over and gave Jessica's hand a firm, triumphant squeeze. Jessica felt a wave of validation so powerful it almost brought tears to her eyes, but she willed them back. This was only the first battle. Daniel's face was a stony mask, but a flush of angry red crept up his neck. Robert Peterson whispered furiously in his ear, likely reassuring him that this changed nothing, that child support was merely a financial nuisance they could manage. Victoria's confident smirk faltered for the first time. It was replaced by a flicker of pure, undiluted annoyance. This complicated the clean break she had envisioned. A child was a permanent link, a recurring financial and emotional drain that would tether Daniel however slightly to the woman she had worked so hard to displace. Still, she recomposed herself quickly. The money was the real prize, and she was sure they still had all of it. "Well," Peterson said, standing with a practiced air of magnanimity, "it seems my client was mistaken, driven to suspicion by the emotional turmoil of a failing marriage. He will, of course, meet his obligations to the child. Now, if that concludes this matter, we can move on to the equitable distribution of assets." He was trying to seize control, to minimize the loss, and steer the conversation back to his territory. But Judge Atwood held up a hand, silencing him. "We are not concluded, Mr. Peterson. Sit down." The judge's tone was sharp, commanding, and Peterson sat abruptly, looking stunned. She then picked up the second envelope. This one was thicker, containing a more complex report. The air in the room, which had momentarily relaxed, grew tense once more. Daniel's eyes were locked on that envelope, a new kind of fear dawning in their depths. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was a weapon that had been aimed at him, and the judge was about to pull the trigger. This court also has the results of a Y chromosome short tandem repeat analysis, Judge Atwood announced, her voice dropping slightly, taking on a gravitas that commanded every ounce of attention in the room. This test was performed to compare the genetic lineage of Mr. Daniel Collins with biological tissue belonging to his late father, Mr. Arthur Collins, obtained from the archives of St. Jude's Medical Center. Peterson shot to his feet. Your Honor, I object. This is irrelevant to the divorce proceedings. This is a private family matter. Your objection is noted and overruled, Mr. Peterson, the judge said, her eyes flashing with impatience. Your client made lineage the cornerstone of his argument. He opened this door. The court is now simply walking through it. Please sit down, or I will have you removed for contempt. Peterson, pale and shaken, sank back into his chair. Daniel was no longer trying to hide his agitation. He was staring at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. What could it possibly say? What did it matter he was a Collins? He had always been a Collins. It was the only truth he had ever known. Judge Atwood tore open the seal. She unfolded the multi-page report, her eyes scanning the technical language and charts. The silence in the courtroom was now so profound, so absolute, that it felt like a physical pressure. Jessica held her breath, her heart pounding a heavy, steady rhythm against her ribs. This was it. The foundation. After what felt like an eternity, the judge looked up. She did not look at Jessica or the lawyers. She looked directly and with an expression of cold pity at Daniel Collins. The Y chromosome is passed directly from father to son, with very little mutation, creating a clear and undeniable genetic fingerprint of a paternal line. She explained, her voice now clinical, as if she were a professor delivering a lecture. The analysis compared 23 markers on the Y chromosome from the sample of Arthur Collins and the sample of Daniel Collins. She paused, letting the weight of her next words gather. Of the 23 markers compared, there are 0 matches. For a heartbeat, the words didn't seem to register. 0 matches. The phrase hung in the dead air of the courtroom, an abstract scientific statement devoid of context. Then the meaning crashed down with the force of a tidal wave. A loud, disbelieving gasp came from the gallery. It was Victoria. Her face, moments before a mask of bored superiority, was now a canvas of utter shock. Her perfectly painted lips were parted in a silent, "Oh," her eyes wide with horrified comprehension. Daniel Collins simply stared. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pallid sheen. He looked at the judge, then at his lawyer, then at Jessica. His expression one of pure, unadulterated bewilderment. It was the look of a man who had been told the sky was green, that gravity no longer existed. The fundamental law of his universe had just been repealed. That's impossible," he stammered the words, catching in his throat. He half rose from his chair, pointing a trembling finger at the bench. "That test is wrong. It's fraudulent. She did this." His finger swiveled to point at Jessica. "Sit down, Mr. Collins." Judge Atwood's voice was like the crack of a whip. "This test was court-ordered performed by a state-certified lab with an unbroken chain of custody. The results are scientifically irrefutable. You are not the biological son of Arthur Collins." The courtroom erupted into a chaotic buzz of whispers. Reporters were scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Robert Peterson looked like he'd been punched in the gut, his face ashen, his slick confidence completely stripped away. He was shuffling through his papers, looking for a script, a procedure for a situation this bizarre, and finding nothing. What does this mean? Daniel asked, his voice now small, childlike. Olivia Chen stood, her demeanor poised and lethal. I can explain what it means, Your Honor. All eyes turned to her. It means, Your Honor, that Mr. Collins has potentially committed fraud on a massive scale. Olivia began, her voice ringing with clarity and conviction. Upon the death of Arthur Collins, my client's husband inherited the entirety of Collins & Son Properties, as well as control of the Collins Family Heritage Trust, a fund valued at over $200 million. I have a copy of the trust's charter right here. She produced a document and placed it on the prosecutor's lectern. Article 3, Section 2 is very specific. The trust and all its assets, including the controlling shares of the company, are to be passed down through direct, verifiable, biological male lineage. It was a document written by a man obsessed with his own bloodline. She turned to face Daniel, her eyes locking onto his. It means, Mr. Collins, that for the last 4 years you have been controlling a company and a fortune to which you have absolutely no legal claim. It means every salary you've drawn, every bonus you've been paid, every asset you've acquired using that wealth has been done under false pretenses. The very foundation of your life is a lie. The word hung in the air, lie. The same word Eleanor had whispered to Jessica at the funeral. Victoria Beaumont stood up abruptly. The intricate web of her future, the mansions, the yachts, the endless river of money was not just fraying. It was being incinerated before her eyes. The man she had attached herself to was not the powerful scion of an old money dynasty. He was a fraud, an imposter. Her face, once a picture of smug beauty, twisted into an ugly snarl of rage and betrayal. She looked at Daniel not with sympathy, but with pure, venomous hatred. You lied to me, she hissed, her voice loud enough to carry through the stunned courtroom. You told me you owned everything. You told me she would be left with nothing. Daniel, still reeling, turned to her, his expression pleading. Tori, I didn't know. Don't you Tory me, she spat, her voice dripping with disgust. She grabbed her designer handbag from the bench. You are nothing. You have nothing. Without a backward glance, she turned and stormed towards the exit, her heels clicking an angry staccato on the marble floor. She shoved her way past a reporter trying to ask her a question and burst through the courtroom doors, slamming them shut behind her. The performance was over. The star actress had walked out the moment she realized her leading man wasn't going to be paid. The spectacle of her exit seemed to finally break Daniel's catatonic state. The bewilderment in his eyes was replaced by a terrifying, all-consuming rage. This was his ultimate nightmare: public humiliation, the loss of control. Everything was being taken from him. His head snapped toward Jessica, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated malice. He saw her not as the mother of his child, or the woman he once promised to love, but as the architect of his ruin. You! He seethed, the word a venomous dart. You did this, you conniving bitch! You dug all this up to destroy me! He lunged forward, his hands outstretched as if to grab her, to physically attack her. Instantly, 2 burly bailiffs who had been watching the scene unfold moved in, intercepting him. They each grabbed an arm, their grips like iron vices. That's enough, Mr. Collins, one of them said, his voice a low growl. Daniel struggled against them, his expensive suit wrinkling, his face contorted in a mask of fury. Get your hands off me! Do you know who I am? The question, once a threat, was now just pathetic. The entire room knew the answer: nobody. Mr. Collins, if you do not compose yourself, I will have you held in contempt, and you will spend the night in a jail cell to think about your actions. Judge Atwood warned, her voice glacial. Your outburst here in front of your pregnant, estranged wife has been noted by the court. The fight seemed to drain out of Daniel all at once. He went limp in the bailiff's grasp, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. They escorted him back to his chair, where he collapsed, burying his face in his hands. The great Daniel Collins, CEO and titan of industry, was weeping like a broken child. Judge Atwood surveyed the wreckage of the man's life with a stern, unwavering gaze. She looked at the abandoned lawyer's table, the empty chair in the gallery where the mistress had been, and the shell of a man who had just lost everything. Then her eyes settled on Jessica. For the first time, Jessica saw something other than judicial impartiality in the judge's expression. It was a look of profound woman-to-woman understanding and perhaps a quiet, steely respect. "Well, Ms. Chen," Judge Atwood said, her voice returning to its formal cadence, though the undertone was unmistakable. "It appears the entire financial landscape of this case has fundamentally changed. The matter of marital assets seems to be far more complex than we initially thought." Olivia Chen gave a small, grim smile. "Indeed, Your Honor, indeed." The unraveling of Daniel Collins was swift and total. The Collins Family Heritage Trust sued him for fraud. The board of Collins and Son fired him, citing catastrophic reputational damage. And the media turned him into a citywide cautionary tale of greed and deception. Stripped of his name, his fortune, and his power, the man who once commanded boardrooms became a social pariah buried under a mountain of legal debt. The divorce settlement was a stunning reversal of fortune. The $15 million Daniel had tried to hide with Victoria was awarded entirely to Jessica. She also kept the marital home free and clear. Daniel was left with nothing but court-ordered child support payments for the son he had tried to disown, a permanent monthly reminder of his ultimate failure. A few months later, Jessica gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Andrew. He was a new beginning, a clean slate. She sold the cold glass house filled with ghosts, and with a portion of her settlement bought a wind-swept piece of land overlooking the ocean. There she did what she was always meant to do. She built. She founded her own small, successful architectural firm, naming it J. Collins and Son. A quiet reclamation of the name, now imbued with honesty and her own hard-won strength. Her first project was her own home, a warm structure of wood and stone designed not to impress but to nurture. Looking out at the steady ocean waves from the home she had created, holding the son she had fought for Jessica, felt a profound peace. She had been tested in the most brutal of ways, her life demolished by a man living a lie. But from the ruins, she had emerged not as a victim, but as an architect, building a new life on the only foundation that truly mattered: the truth. Jessica's story is a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, when the world seems to have turned against us, we possess a strength we never knew we had. It's a story about how one woman pushed to the absolute brink used the truth, not just as a shield, but as a sword, dismantling an empire of lies to build a new life of honesty and hope for her and her son. Her journey from a collapsing victim in a hostile courtroom to the master of her own destiny is a testament to resilience and the ultimate power of integrity. If her incredible fight for justice and a new beginning moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a story of hope and the triumph of truth. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life drama. What did you think of the judge's final ruling? Let us know in the comments below.
Some lies are whispered in secret, but the most devastating ones are defended in public. This isn't a story about a simple affair. It's about the weaponization of trust and the blinding arrogance of a man who had everything. Alistair Finch was a titan of industry, a millionaire who thought he could control every narrative, including the one about the woman on his arm who wasn't his wife. He stood before the world and called the gossips vicious, defending his mistress's honor. What he never anticipated was that his pregnant wife, Sophia, was not just listening. She was collecting evidence. This is the story of how a woman scorned didn't just get revenge. She orchestrated a takedown so spectacular, so public, that it would bring an empire to its knees. The Finch estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was less a home and more a monument to calculated success. Manicured lawns, so perfect they looked like CGI rolled down to the calm grey waters of the Long Island Sound. Inside the house was a symphony of minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows, stark white walls adorned with imposing modern art and furniture, so exquisitely uncomfortable it could only be expensive. It was a house designed to be photographed for magazines, not to be lived in. And lately, Sophia Finch felt more like a part of the decor than a resident. At 7 months pregnant, she felt a profound disconnect from the sterile perfection that surrounded her. Her body was a landscape of change, swelling, shifting, and beautifully unpredictable, in a home where every coaster and cushion had its designated unchangeable spot. Her husband, Alistair Finch, was the architect of this world, a tech mogul who had clawed his way from a middle-class background in Ohio to the zenith of New York's financial world. Alistair worshipped at the altar of control. His company, Finch Innovations, was his first child, and its meteoric rise was a testament to his relentless drive and his inability to accept anything less than flawlessness. Their marriage, once a passionate partnership, had slowly cooled to a business arrangement. He provided the gilded cow. She was the beautiful bird he kept within it, a testament to his good taste and a hostess for his endless parade of investors and sycophants. Sophia, a former forensic accountant with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, had willingly set aside her career to support his. She had believed in the dream they were building. Now she wandered its empty halls, the silence broken only by the phantom buzz of her phone and the growing distance in her husband's eyes. The whispers began as they always do online. It was a Tuesday morning. The sunlight streaming through the panoramic windows did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in Sophia's bones. She was scrolling through her tablet, looking at articles about organic baby food, when a headline from Penelope Vance's notorious gossip blog Vance's Verdict caught her eye. Tech titan Alistair Finch's newest asset sources say the Finch Innovation CEO has been spotted getting cozy with a mysterious brunette all over Manhattan. Is there trouble in the Greenwich paradise for his very pregnant wife? The accompanying photo was blurry, taken from a distance. It showed the back of Alistair's head, his distinctive silver-streaked dark hair unmistakable. He was leaning in close to a woman at a dimly lit bar, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The woman was turned away, but her silhouette was slender, elegant, draped in a silk dress that shimmered even in the poor lighting. Sophia's heart didn't break. It seized. It was the cold, hard confirmation of a fear she had been refusing to name for months. The late nights he'd called board meetings, the sudden business trips to Boston, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging faintly to his suit jackets. When Alistair came home that evening, he was the picture of the doting husband, a performance he'd perfected. He kissed her cheek, his lips cool and brief, before placing a hand on her swollen belly. "How are my two favorite people doing?" he asked, his voice a low, practiced rumble. Sophia held up the tablet. She didn't speak, just watched his face. For a fleeting second, a flicker of something annoyance, fear crossed his features before the mask of charming indifference snapped back into place. He scoffed a theatrical sound. "Oh, for God's sake, Sophia. Penelope Vance. The woman is a bottom feeder. She makes a living inventing scandals. You can't possibly be taking this seriously." Your hand is on her back, Alistair. Sophia said, her voice unnervingly steady. You're in a bar, not a boardroom. It's Serafina Monet, he said, waving a dismissive hand, as if the name should mean nothing and everything all at once. She's an art consultant, a potential client for a new philanthropic tech venture I'm exploring. The photo is taken completely out of context. We were at a crowded gallery event, and I was steering her through the throng. Vance's photographer must have waited for the perfect moment to create a fiction. Serafina Monet. The name sounded like a character from a novel, all silk and smoke. Sophia had heard him mention her once or twice, a fleeting reference to a new contact, who was incredibly well connected in the art world. You never told me you were courting new clients for a philanthropic venture. Sophia said, her gaze unwavering. It's in the early stages. I didn't want to bore you with the details until it was more concrete. He deflected smoothly. Sophia, listen to me. You're pregnant, you're emotional. It's understandable. But letting this kind of trash get to you is beneath you. It's beneath us. I'm building an empire for this family. For our son. Do you really think I would jeopardize that for a meaningless dalliance? His words were a masterclass in manipulation. He'd acknowledged her pregnancy, framed her valid concern as hormonal instability, and redirected her to his grand purpose all in one breath. The old Sophia might have been swayed, might have apologized for her lack of faith. But the woman sitting before him now was different. The life growing inside her had ignited a primal protective instinct that was more powerful than any lie he could spin. I see, she said, her voice betraying no emotion. She closed the tablet and placed it on the marble coffee table. Well, I'm glad you cleared that up. Alistair smiled, a triumphant, predatory gleam in his eyes. He believed he had won. He leaned in to kiss her again, but she shifted slightly, and his lips met the air just beside her temple. He didn't seem to notice, or perhaps chose not to. Good, he said, straightening his tie. Now forget about it. David Chen is coming over for dinner to discuss the Q3 projections. I need you to be the brilliant, charming hostess you always are. As he walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the cavernous, sun-drenched space, Sophia felt a cold resolve settle over her. He hadn't just lied to her, he had insulted her intelligence. He saw her as a fragile, emotional liability, not a partner. He had mentioned Serafina Monet's name so casually, so dismissively, that it could only mean one thing: she was important. And if Alistair was protecting her this fiercely, it was because there was something dangerous to protect. Sophia picked up her phone, her fingers moving with a purpose they hadn't had in years. She didn't navigate to a gossip site or a friend's social media page. She opened a secure browser and typed in a series of keywords, her old forensic accounting instincts roaring back to life. Serafina Monet, art consultant, New York. The game had changed. Alistair thought he was managing a minor pay crisis with his pregnant wife. He had no idea he had just declared war on the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle the pristine, perfect world he had built, one verifiable fact at a time. The serpent had been named, and Sophia was now ready to follow its trail, no matter how deep into the darkness it led. The Gilded Cage was about to become a battleground. The annual Patrons of the Arts Gala was the glittering apex of the New York City social calendar, a night where old money and new tech collided in a blinding flash of diamonds. For Alistair and Sophia Finch, it was a command performance. This year, Finch Innovations was the title sponsor, and a massive banner bearing the company's sleek minimalist logo was draped behind the stage in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sophia felt like she was preparing for combat. She chose her dress with strategic precision, a deep emerald gown of flowing silk that didn't hide her pregnancy, but celebrated it, draping her form in a way that was both regal and defiant. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and the famous Finch diamonds, a wedding gift from Alistair, felt cold and heavy around her neck. As she looked at her reflection, she didn't see a victim. She saw a queen surveying her kingdom, even if she knew a usurper was already within the castle walls. Alistair was buzzing with an almost manic energy, his charm turned up to its highest wattage. "You look breathtaking, Sophia," he murmured, his hand finding the small of her back as they stepped out of the black town car into a maelstrom of flashing cameras. "Absolutely radiant. They won't be able to talk about anything else." Sophia knew he was right, but not for the reasons he thought. His praise was a tool, a way to ensure she played her part. Tonight her role was the adored, pregnant wife, a living, breathing symbol of his stability and good fortune. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and couture gowns. The air hummed with forced laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. They made their way through the crowd, Alistair shaking hands and accepting accolades, while Sophia smiled serenely, her mind a whirring calculator of observations. She watched the way people's eyes darted from her belly to Alistair's face, searching for cracks in the facade. The Vance's verdict piece had made the rounds. Everyone here had read it. They were talking to Alistair's business partner, David Chen, when it happened. David, a sharp, no-nonsense man who had always treated Sophia with genuine respect, was in the middle of a sentence about market volatility when a hush fell over their small circle. A woman had approached them, her movement so fluid and deliberate it was like she was gliding. She was tall and impossibly thin, poured into a blood-red dress that left little to the imagination. Her hair was a cascade of dark, glossy curls, and her large, doe-like eyes were fixed on Alistair with an expression of manufactured vulnerability. It was Seraphina Monet. In person, she was even more striking than Sophia had imagined, a creature of exquisite and dangerous beauty. "Alistair, I am so dreadfully sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice a husky whisper that was clearly intended to be overheard. She placed a delicate, long-fingered hand on his tuxedoed arm. "I just saw Penelope Vance lurking by the bar, and I felt a panic attack coming on. What she wrote was so vile, so untrue. I've barely been able to leave my apartment." Alistair immediately shifted into protector mode. He covered her hand with his posture changing from that of a CEO to a guardian. "Seraphina, don't give that woman another thought. She is irrelevant. We are all fine." He then turned to Sophia, his expression a mixture of feigned nonchalance and clear warning. "Sophia, darling, you remember I mentioned Seraphina Monet, an art consultant I've been advising." He had framed it as if he were advising her a subtle but significant twist. Sophia met Seraphina's gaze. The woman's eyes were not filled with panic. They were cold, assessing, and triumphant. This was no chance encounter. This was a calculated strike designed to happen here in the most public of arenas. "Of course," Sophia said, her voice smooth as ice. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman from the photograph." The barb, though subtle, landed. A flicker of irritation crossed Seraphina's face before she quickly replaced it with a look of wounded innocence. She turned her tear-brimmed eyes back to Alistair. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Finch. I can't imagine how this must look to you. Alistair has been such a gentleman, a true friend, helping me navigate a very complex acquisition for my portfolio. That photograph, it was a moment of him offering me support after a difficult negotiation. To have it twisted into something so sordid is it's devastating." Every word was a lie polished to a perfect shine. She was painting herself as the victim, a professional woman maligned by a jealous press, and by extension, a potentially jealous wife. She was cornering Sophia, forcing her to either accept the lie graciously or make a scene and prove Penelope Vance's narrative correct. Alistair, completely ensnared, fell for it entirely. "Sophia understands completely," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He squeezed Seraphina's hand. "You are a respected professional, and I will not have your reputation tarnished by association with me. Nor will I have my wife upset by baseless rumors." He was defending her, openly, in front of his business partner and a dozen pairs of straining ears. He was choosing his mistress's reputation over his wife's dignity. The humiliation was a physical blow, a hot wave of shame and anger that washed over Sophia. She could feel the stares, the pitying glances, the satisfied smirks. In that moment, she was no longer Sophia Finch, the brilliant former accountant. She was the pregnant wife, the obstacles, the cliché. David Chen cleared his throat, sensing the imminent explosion. Alistair, the auction is about to start. We should probably find our seats. Yes, of course, Alistair said finally, releasing Serafina's hand, though his eyes lingered on her for a moment too long. Serafina, you must stay and enjoy the evening. Hold your head high. Thank you, Alistair. You're too kind, she whispered, before giving Sophia a small, almost imperceptible smirk and melting back into the crowd. As they walked toward their table at the front of the ballroom, the silence between them was thick and suffocating. Alistair leaned in his voice, a low, angry hiss, meant only for her. What was that, the woman from the photograph? Are you trying to cause a scene? Sophia stopped dead in her tracks, forcing him to turn and face her. The curated smiles of the New York elite surrounded them, but in their small bubble the truth was laid bare. A scene, she whispered back, her voice trembling with a tightly controlled fury. You are the one causing a scene, Alistair. You just publicly comforted your mistress, and in the same breath told me how I should feel about it. You humiliated me. You humiliated our family, this child. She placed a hand on her stomach, all to soothe the manufactured tears of a woman who orchestrated that entire encounter. She is a victim here, Sophia. Her reputation is at stake, he retorted, his face reddening. Her reputation. Sophia let out a short, incredulous laugh that was devoid of humor. What about mine? Or do I no longer have one now that my only job is to carry your air and smile at your galas? The cruelty of her words hit him. He recoiled slightly, his anger momentarily replaced by shock. But the moment passed and the defensive walls went back up. That's unfair, and you know it. You are overwrought. We will discuss this at home, not here. He turned and strode to their table, leaving her standing alone for a moment in the middle of the grand ballroom. The flash of a camera went off somewhere to her right. Penelope Vance had her photo for tomorrow's column. Sophia took a deep, steadying breath. The humiliation was still burning, but beneath it, a new feeling was taking root, crystalline cold and absolute certainty. He would not get away with this. She would not be the weeping, hysterical wife. She would not let him gaslight her into believing she was crazy. He had made his choice in front of everyone. Now she would make hers in the quiet, methodical shadows where she did her best work. As she sat down at the table, forcing a placid smile for the people seated around them, Sophia made a silent vow. She would uncover every lie Serafina Monet had ever told. She would find every skeleton in her closet, and she would not expose it to Alistair. She would expose it to the world. The days following the gala were a study in cold warfare. Alistair and Sophia moved through their cavernous home like two opposing magnets, maintaining a carefully calibrated distance. He was superficially solicitous, constantly asking about her health and the baby, a transparent attempt to paper over the chasm he had opened between them. He treated her like a patient, a delicate thing to be managed. Sophia, in turn, played her part. She was serene, compliant, and utterly remote. She knew that any display of anger or suspicion would be dismissed as hormonal hysterics, a weapon he would use to invalidate her. Her calm was her camouflage. Her real life began after midnight. Once Alistair's steady breathing filled the master suite, Sophia would slip out of bed and make her way to the disused home office at the far end of the house. It was the one room Alistair never entered, a space filled with her old textbooks, files from her previous career, and a high-spec computer she'd insisted on when they first moved in. At the time, she'd called it a whim. Now, it was her arsenal. The skills she had honed as a forensic accountant, tracking money, finding patterns in chaos, understanding that the digital world always leaves a ghost, came rushing back. She didn't start by looking for evidence of the affair. An affair was a private pain. To defeat Serafina and awaken Alistair from his delusion, she needed to attack the woman's entire public persona. She needed to prove she was a fraud, not just a homewrecker. Her first target was Serafina Monet, art consultant. The name itself felt like a stage name. Sophia began by running corporate searches. There was no registered business under that name in New York, Delaware, or any other likely state. No LLC, no S-Corp. Strange for a well-respected professional dealing in high-value acquisitions. She then searched for a digital footprint. Serafina had a carefully curated Instagram account filled with photos of herself at gallery openings, art auctions, and exclusive parties. Each post was a masterpiece of social climbing, tagging famous artists and wealthy patrons. But it was all surface, no substance. There was no professional website, no LinkedIn profile detailing her experience, no published articles or interviews about her supposed expertise. Sophia called her best friend Dr. Amelia Reed, a sharp-witted obstetrician who had been her rock through the pregnancy. It's like she didn't exist before 2020. Sophia said, her voice low as she paced the office, the screen glowing in the dark. Her entire online presence springs into existence fully formed 3 years ago. Before that, nothing. People rebrand themselves all the time, Soph. Amelia said, her voice warm but cautious. Maybe she changed her name. Got married and divorced. That's what I thought, Sophia replied, clicking through a new set of search results. But there are no marriage or divorce records under that name. It's cleaner than a new identity in a witness protection program. It's artificial. The first thread appeared a few nights later. Sophia had set up alerts for Serafina's name on social media. A post from a small independent gallery in Soho tagged her in a group photo from an opening 2 years prior. In the comments, an old acquaintance had written, "Great to see you, Jenny. You're looking amazing." Jenny? It was a small thing, a digital breadcrumb. But for Sophia, it was a seismic event. She cross-referenced the commenter's profile, finding more pictures of them with Serafina or Jenny dating back 5 or 6 years. In these older photos, the woman looked different. Her hair was lighter, her clothes less expensive, her ambition less hidden behind a veneer of class. The name in the tags was Jennifer Peterson. The digital dam began to break. A search for Jennifer Peterson in New York yielded a few minor records, a couple of traffic violations, a rental application for a tiny apartment in Hell's Kitchen. But a nationwide search for Jennifer Peterson, cross-referenced with public records databases, she paid a hefty subscription fee to access opened a Pandora's box. Jennifer Jenny Peterson was from a dusty town in Arizona. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a waitress. There was no old money, no European finishing school, no inherited art collection. There was, however, a series of small claims, court judgments against her in Scottsdale for unpaid rent and credit card debt. And then Sophia found the first big one, a lawsuit filed in Los Angeles 8 years ago. The plaintiff was a retired film producer in his late 60s. The defendant was Jennifer Peterson. The accusation, fraud. According to the court documents, Jenny had presented herself as an aspiring actress and interior designer, convincing the producer to invest over $100,000 in a non-existent interior design business. She had vanished the day after the final wire transfer cleared. The case was eventually dismissed when she couldn't be located to be served papers. Sophia's breath caught in her chest. It was a pattern, a modus operandi. Find a wealthy, older, perhaps lonely man. Create a persona that appeals to his ego. Isolate him, drain his resources, and disappear. With Alistair, she had clearly refined her methods, aiming not just for a payout, but for a complete hostile takeover of a man's life. The art consultant persona was her most ambitious creation yet. She began connecting the dots, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She traced Jennifer Peterson's move from Arizona to LA and then to Miami. In Miami, she found another ghost, a woman named Sarah Petrova, a supposed Russian heiress who had charmed her way into the yachting community before disappearing amidst whispers of a bad real estate deal gone south. The timeline matched, the description matched, the method matched. It was all there, a trail of discarded identities and financial wreckage. Serafina Monet was not a person. She was a meticulously constructed brand, a special-purpose vehicle for fraud. The weight of it all pressed down on Sophia. This was so much bigger than an affair. Alistair wasn't just being unfaithful, he was being conned. His arrogance, his belief that he was the smartest man in any room, had made him the perfect mark. He was so sure of his own judgment that he couldn't see the predator right in front of him, the one whispering in his ear how brilliant and misunderstood he was. Amelia's voice brought her back to the present. "Soph, you've been quiet for a while. Did you find something?" Sophia leaned back in her chair, the first rays of dawn beginning to streak the sky. She felt exhausted, but also electrified. The humiliation of the gala felt distant, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. "I found everything, Amelia," she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I found the thread, and I'm going to pull on it until her entire world unravels." She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She wasn't even sure she wanted it. She was fighting for the truth for her child's future, and for the part of herself that Alistair had tried to make her forget, the sharp, relentless woman who never, ever let a lie go unpunished. Serafina Monet was a masterful strategist. She knew that her greatest asset was not her beauty, but her ability to control the narrative. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere at the Finch estate, the icy politeness from Sophia, the subtle tension in Alistair, she decided to launch a preemptive strike. She didn't wait for Sophia to act. She painted Sophia as the aggressor. Her campaign began with a series of frantic, tearful phone calls to Alistair. "I don't know what to do, Alistair," she would cry into the phone, her voice a perfect symphony of fear and fragility. "Your wife. She's having me followed. A man in a dark car was parked outside my apartment all day yesterday. I'm terrified." There was no man, of course, but the seed was planted. A few days later, another call. A private investigator called my gallerist asking strange questions about my credentials. He said he was hired by Sophia Finch. "He's trying to ruin my reputation. Alistair, my entire business is built on trust. If people think I'm being investigated, I'm finished. Why is she doing this to me?" I thought she understood. Each lie was a carefully aimed dart designed to trigger Alistair's deepest insecurities and his most potent instincts. His desire to be a protector, his disdain for what he saw as petty domestic drama, and his growing impatience with Sophia's perceived emotionalism. He saw Serafina as a fellow professional, a brilliant woman, being unfairly targeted, and Sophia as the irrational, hormonal wife, succumbing to baseless jealousy. The confrontation Sophia had been dreading and preparing for came on a Sunday afternoon. Rain lashed against the giant windows of the living room, mirroring the storm brewing in Sinbad. Alistair had been quiet all day, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He finally cornered her as she was organizing the newly delivered baby clothes in the nursery, a room of soft yellows and whites that felt like a sanctuary. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He closed the door behind him, shutting them in with the scent of fresh paint and impending disaster. "About what?" Alistair, Sophia asked, continuing to fold a tiny cashmere sweater, her hands steady. "About your harassment of Serafina Monet," he snapped, dispensing with any pretense. "Hiring a private investigator, having her followed. What in God's name do you think you're doing, Sophia?" Sophia turned to face him slowly. She had not hired an investigator. She was far too meticulous to delegate such a task and risk exposure. Serafina had invented it, feeding Alistair the very conclusion Sophia had hoped to avoid. "I haven't hired anyone, Alistair," she said calmly. "That's a fiction she's created to make herself the victim." "A fiction," he scoffed, taking a step closer. His 6-foot frame seemed to dominate the peaceful room. She is terrified. She's a single woman, and you're using our resources to intimidate her. It's despicable. I thought you were better than this. I know you're pregnant, and your hormones are all over the place, but this is madness. It's paranoid. The gaslighting was so textbook, it was almost laughable. He was using her pregnancy, the very thing that had made her stronger and more clear-eyed than ever, as a tool to dismiss her. My hormones are not the issue here, Sophia said, her voice dropping to a steely low. Your infidelity is the issue. Your blatant disregard for me and for our marriage is the issue. The fact that you are being played for a fool by a con artist is the issue. The word con artist hung in the air between them. Alistair's face, already flushed with anger, turned a shade darker. How dare you? She is a respected businesswoman, a brilliant mind, and she has become a dear friend. You know nothing about her. You're just lashing out because you feel threatened. A dear friend. Sophia challenged, finally letting her composure crack. Friends don't call you at midnight. Friends don't let you buy them Cartier bracelets. Friends don't stand by and let you publicly humiliate your pregnant wife. Alistair flinched, as if struck. I bought her a gift for her birthday, a token of my esteem. You're twisting everything. You're building a conspiracy in your head because you can't stand the idea that I might have a connection with another woman that is purely platonic and intellectual. There is nothing platonic about it, and you know it. Sophia's voice rose, the fury she had suppressed for weeks finally boiling over. Open your eyes, Alistair. The woman is a phantom. She has no verifiable history, no registered business, nothing. She's feeding you a story, and you're swallowing it whole because it strokes your ego. Enough, he roared, his voice bouncing off the cheerful animal-stenciled walls. You will stop this immediately. You will not contact her. You will not investigate her. You will leave her alone. Is that understood? My entire philanthropic venture is tied up with her contacts. You are putting millions of dollars and the future of Finch Innovations' charitable arm at risk because of your petty, unfounded jealousy. He had completely absorbed Serafina's narrative. He truly believed that Sophia was the threat, the irrational element that could bring his carefully constructed world crashing down. He saw Serafina as an asset and his wife as a liability. Sophia stared at him, and for the first time she felt nothing but a profound, hollow pity. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool. A brilliant, powerful, arrogant fool who was so blinded by a cheap fantasy that he couldn't see the truth right in front of him. I understand, she said, her voice suddenly quiet and defeated. It was the performance he needed to see. The fight went out of her posture. Her shoulders slumped and she looked down at her hands. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just not myself lately. Alistair's relief was immediate and palpable. His posture softened, and the anger in his eyes was replaced by a patronizing sympathy. He stepped forward and put his hands on her shoulders. I know, darling, he said, his voice becoming gentle. It's a lot to handle. The pregnancy, the stress. I get it. Just trust me on this. Serafina is a good person. A friend. Let's not let this ugliness come between us. He believed he had won. He had quelled the rebellion, managed the situation. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of benevolent ownership. Rest. I'll have dinner sent up for you. He left the nursery, closing the door softly behind him, leaving her in the cloying silence. Sophia stood motionless for a full minute. The moment he was gone, her spine straightened. The look of defeat vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of cold, diamond-hard resolve. His defense of Serafina had been more passionate, more absolute than she had ever imagined. He had threatened his own company, his own legacy to protect her. He had called his wife mad to preserve his mistress's lies. He hadn't just drawn a line in the sand. He had built a fortress on it and dared her to cross. And Sophia knew, with chilling certainty, that she wouldn't just cross it. She would burn the fortress to the ground with everyone inside. He wanted her to stop fine. She would stop investigating in secret. The next time he heard about her findings, it wouldn't be from a hysterical wife in a nursery. It would be in a forum so public, so devastating, that he would have no choice but to see the truth. Sophia's feigned surrender bought her exactly what she needed: time and a false sense of security for her enemies. Alistair, believing he had pacified her, redoubled his efforts with Serafina, both personally and professionally. He was now openly championing the Finch Monet Arts Initiative, a charitable foundation that existed, as far as Sophia could tell, only on paper and in Serafina's bank account. He funneled a significant amount of seed money into a holding company Serafina had established, a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. While Alistair was busy being the magnanimous benefactor, Sophia was deep in the digital trenches, assembling an arsenal of truth so damning it would be irrefutable. The discovery of Jennifer Peterson was just the beginning. Sophia needed to connect that past to Serafina Monet's present, in a way that no one, not even a love-blinded Alistair, could deny. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source: social media vanity. On Serafina's curated Instagram, amidst photos from Christie's auctions and Gstad ski trips, was a picture of her with her beloved Russian wolfhound Boris. It was a beautiful dog, and the post was filled with comments fawning over it. Working on a hunch, Sophia hired a genealogical and public records specialist in Arizona, giving her the name Jennifer Peterson and a simple instruction: find any record of pet ownership. 2 days later, she got an email. Jennifer Peterson had for 7 years owned a registered Russian wolfhound. His name was Tsar. He had been microchipped. The specialist provided the chip number. Sophia then contacted a network of high-end veterinarians in New York under the guise of an executive assistant, looking to find the best care for her boss's new dog. Posing as an assistant to Serafina Monet, she called a clinic on the Upper East Side. "Yes, Ms. Monet is a new client," she said coolly into the phone. "She'd like to transfer the file for her dog Boris. She's not sure if you have the microchip number on file, but I have it here if that helps." She read the number for Ja. The receptionist paused for a moment. "Oh yes, I see it. The chip is registered to a Jennifer Peterson. Is that Ms. Monet's previous name?" "It is," Sophia lied smoothly. "From a former marriage. Checkmate." She now had a concrete physical link between the two identities provided by Serafina herself. A detail so small, so sentimental, that the master manipulator had overlooked it. With this link established, Sophia worked backwards, filling in the gaps of Serafina's fraudulent life. She found the web of lies was more intricate than she could have imagined. Serafina hadn't just faked her name and background. She had fabricated an entire academic and professional history. The degree from the Sorbonne, listed on a bio for a charity event, the university had no record of her. The internship at the Louvre, a complete fiction. The art consultancy was the most brilliant part of the scam. It provided the perfect cover. The art world was notoriously opaque, a place where multi-million-dollar deals could be made on a handshake, and where provenance and reputation were everything. By creating a persona of old-world class and deep knowledge, she could operate without the usual scrutiny of a financial professional. Sophia's accounting skills went into overdrive. She began to investigate the holding company in the Cayman Islands, where Alistair had sent the seed money. It was a classic shell corporation, designed for one purpose: to make money disappear. But Serafina had made a mistake. To open the account, she had needed a signatory, a director, on paper. And for that, she had used an old associate, a man whose name, Sophia, had found listed as a co-defendant in a minor real estate fraud case in Miami from 5 years prior, a case that had also involved one Sarah Petrova. The man's name was Ricardo Vargas. A quick search revealed he was a low-level grifter currently residing in New Jersey. He was not the type to be loyal. For $5,000 wired from a specially created anonymous account, Ricardo Vargas was willing to talk. Not to Sophia directly, but to a lawyer she hired for a single recorded consultation. The transcript of that call was the nail in the coffin. Jenny, yeah, I know, Jenny Peterson. Ricardo's voice crackled on the recording. Or Sarah, or Serafina, or whatever she's calling herself this week. She's a genius, I'll give her that. She finds these rich guys who think they're masters of the universe, and she becomes their perfect fantasy. She told me about this new one, the tech guy, Finch. She said he was the biggest fish she'd ever hooked. Said he was so arrogant, he'd believe anything she told him. The plan was never to stick around. It was to set up this fake foundation, get him to pour in a few million, and then poof. She'd be on a beach in Bali, and he'd be explaining to his board where their charitable donations went. The lawyer pressed him. So, the Finch Monet Arts Initiative is not a legitimate enterprise. Ricardo laughed a harsh, ugly sound. It's as legitimate as her last name. It's a bank account, that's all. The only art she's interested in is the art of the steal. Sophia sat in her dark office, listening to the recording, and a profound calm washed over her. She had it all. The name changes, the prior lawsuits, the fabricated credentials, the link between her identities via the dog's microchip, the Shell Corporation, and now a sworn testimony from a co-conspirator detailing the entire plot. She carefully compiled every piece of evidence into a single, devastating presentation. Bank statements, court filings, screenshots, audio files, academic registrar letters. It was a forensic accountant's masterpiece, a meticulous and brutal vivisection of a life built on lies. She looked at the calendar. Finch Innovations' annual shareholder and press conference was in 1 week. It was Alistair's favourite day of the year, a chance for him to stand on a stage under bright lights and regale the world with his success and his vision for the future. He had already told her that he planned to officially announce the Finch Monet Arts Initiative at the event, with Serafina in the front row. He was planning to present his shining new philanthropic venture to the world. He was going to celebrate the woman who had captivated him, the brilliant mind he so admired. He had no idea he was actually setting the stage for his own public execution. Sophia would let him build the stage turn on the lights and invite the audience. She would simply provide the final act. The grand ballroom of the New York Hilton Midtown was electric with anticipation. Hundreds of shareholders, journalists, and tech industry analysts filled the seats, their faces upturned toward the sleek, minimalist stage. A massive screen displayed the Finch Innovations logo pulsing gently like a calm blue heart. This was Alistair Finch's cathedral, and he was about to deliver the sermon. Backstage, Alistair felt the familiar pre-show adrenaline. He straightened his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, ran a hand through his hair, and smiled at his reflection. Today was a triumph. The Q3 numbers were spectacular, and he was about to announce the philanthropic initiative that would cement his legacy, not just as a titan, but as a visionary. He glanced toward the front row of the auditorium, where a seat was reserved for Serafina Monet. She was already there, a vision in white, looking every bit the elegant partner. Her presence filled him with a sense of rightness, a confirmation that he was on the correct path. He had barely spoken to Sophia all week. She had been quiet, withdrawn, which he'd interpreted as her sulking but ultimately accepting his authority. She had told him she wasn't feeling well enough to attend, and he had been secretly relieved. Her presence would have been a complication, a dark cloud on his perfect day. The event began as expected. Alistair took the stage to thunderous applause. He was a master orator, charismatic and compelling. He walked the audience through the company's successes, unveiling new products and painting a dazzling picture of the future. David Chen sat on stage with the other board members, looking proud, but also, if one looked closely, deeply weary. But innovation isn't just about profits, Alistair said, his voice resonating with passion as he reached the climax of his speech. It's about purpose. It's about giving back. For months, I have been working with a truly brilliant partner, a visionary in the world of arts and philanthropy, to create something truly special. It is my immense honor to officially announce the Finch Monet Arts Initiative. A picture of Alistair and a smiling Seraphina appeared on the giant screen behind him. The audience applauded politely. Seraphina, in the front row, touched her heart and gave Alistair a radiant, grateful smile. This multi-million-dollar initiative, Alistair continued, will fund underserved artists and bring art education to communities that need it most. It is a testament to what can be achieved when technology and art, when vision and passion come together. He was about to continue when he noticed a small commotion at the side of the stage. A technician was speaking urgently to the events manager, pointing toward the back of the auditorium. Alistair paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. And then a new voice cut through the ballroom's sound system. It was calm, clear, and feminine. That is a beautiful sentiment, Alistair. Every head in the room turned. Walking slowly, but purposefully down the center aisle, was Sophia Finch. She was not dressed in a victim's somber tones. She wore a striking power suit of cobalt blue, tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. Her face was serene, her expression unreadable. She held a small remote in her hand. Alistair froze his face, a mask of disbelief and fury. Sophia. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. His voice accidentally caught by the microphone before he leaned away. Seraphina's smile faltered. Her eyes widened in panic. Sophia reached the small staircase at the side of the stage and ascended it gracefully. The event staff, too, stunned to intervene, simply watched. She walked to the center of the stage, stopping a few feet from her husband. "I apologize for the interruption," everyone she said into the microphone, her voice steady and strong, betraying no hint of nerves. "My husband is right. It is a testament to what can be achieved when vision and passion come together. But I believe in full transparency, especially when it comes to charitable endeavors. So I'd like to add a few details to this exciting announcement." She clicked the remote. The image of Alistair and Seraphina on the screen vanished, replaced by a mugshot from a courthouse in Los Angeles 8 years ago. It was a younger, harder-looking Seraphina. Underneath, in bold letters, it read, "Jennifer Peterson, defendant case, LA 45, E789, charge, fraud." A collective gasp went through the audience. The journalists were already scrambling cameras, flashing fingers, flying across keyboards. Seraphina shot to her feet, her face ashen. "This is insane. It's a lie. That's not me." Alistair stared at the screen, then at Sophia, his mind unable to process what was happening. "Sophia, stop this. Stop this right now." Sophia ignored them both. She clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared, a diagram showing a web of names: Jennifer Peterson, Sarah Petrova, Seraphina Monet, all connected to a string of lawsuits and fraud allegations in 3 different states. Seraphina Monet is an invention. Sophia announced, her voice ringing with authority. A persona created by a woman named Jennifer Peterson, a career con artist who preys on wealthy, powerful men. Click. The next slide showed the incorporation documents for the shell company in the Cayman Islands. The Finch Monet Arts Initiative is not a foundation. It is a bank account in the Cayman Islands designed to launder the seed money my husband has so generously provided. Alistair looked wildly from the screen to Seraphina, who was now trembling, her mask of sophistication shattering. "Seraphina, what is this?" he stammered. The final click was the most damning. Sophia's voice was replaced by a scratchy audio recording that boomed through the ballroom speakers. It was Ricardo Vargas. She said he was the biggest fish she'd ever hooked. Said he was so arrogant he'd believe anything she told him. The plan was to get him to pour in a few million, and then poof. The sound of Ricardo's cruel laughter filled the stunned silence. That was the breaking point. Seraphina let out a strangled cry and made a dash for the exit, but 2 uniformed police officers, whom Sophia had arranged to have waiting discreetly at the back of the hall, stepped forward to intercept her. Her escape was cut off. On stage, Alistair finally understood. The full catastrophic weight of his folly crashed down on him. The affair, the lies he'd believed, the public defense of a criminal, the gaslighting of his own wife, it all coalesced into a moment of pure, agonizing humiliation. He looked at Sophia, at the calm, determined woman standing before him, and he didn't see his wife. He saw a stranger, a force of nature that had just publicly and systematically dismantled his entire world. The company's stock ticker, visible on a news screen at the side of the room, was already showing a precipitous, terrifying dive. Sophia turned from the wreckage of her husband's face and addressed the audience one last time. Finch. Innovations is a company built on integrity, she said, her voice softening slightly. I have no doubt it will recover, but integrity requires truth. And today I felt it was my duty as a member of the Finch family to provide it. She set the remote down on the lectern, gave a final brief nod to the stunned board members, and walked off the stage. She didn't look back at Alistair. She didn't look at the chaos erupting in the ballroom as Serafina was escorted out. She walked head held high through the parting sea of shocked faces and out the doors, into the bright, clear light of a future she had reclaimed for herself. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Finchgate, as the media dubbed it, became a supernova of a scandal. Finch Innovations stock plummeted by 40% overnight, and the board forced Alistair Finch to take an indefinite leave of absence. His image as a brilliant titan was shattered, replaced by the caricature of a fool fleeced by a con artist. Serafina Monet or Jennifer Peterson faced a litany of federal charges. With Sophia's meticulous evidence, the case was airtight, and her glamorous life evaporated into the prospect of a long prison sentence. She was a footnote, the catalyst for the main story. The world's focus was on Sophia. She was hailed as a feminist icon, offered book deals and television interviews, but she refused them all. She had not done it for fame, or for the Team Sophia hashtags that trended for weeks. She had done it for her own peace, for her child's future, and for the simple, brutal necessity of the truth. She filed for divorce the day after the conference. Alistair, a broken man, didn't contest it. He sent a barrage of desperate apologies, pleading for one last meeting. Sophia agreed to see him in the cold, sterile office of her lawyer. He looked older, smaller, diminished by the public disgrace. "I am sorry, Sophia," he said, his voice raspy. "More than I can ever say. I betrayed you. I was blinded by ego." Sophia listened, her expression calm. The man she had loved was a ghost. This stranger was someone she could never trust again. "I believe that you are sorry, Alistair," she said, her voice even and firm. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you were humiliated. But you were not sorry when you were lying to me, and you were not sorry when you called me paranoid and hormonal. That is the truth of who you were in those moments, and that is something I can never forget." She took a steadying breath. "I don't hate you, but what I feel now is nothing. Our son will know who his father is. You may have a place in his life if you earn it, but you will no longer have a place in mine." The finality in her words was absolute. The divorce was settled quickly. Sophia received a substantial settlement, not punitive, but enough to ensure her and her child's independence forever. She didn't want his empire, she just wanted her freedom. She left Greenwich and the cold glass house behind, purchasing a beautiful brownstone on a tree-lined street in Brooklyn. She designed a warm, comfortable nursery and reconnected with friends like Amelia, who had been her steadfast support system. 2 months later, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She named him Nicholas, not a dynastic name to tie him to the Finch legacy, but a name that was all his own. Holding her son in the quiet morning light of her new home, Sophia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had walked through fire not to destroy her husband, but to save herself. The world would remember the scandal, but for Sophia, that was just the prologue. Her real story, the one that truly mattered, was just beginning. It would be the story of a mother and her son, of strength, forged in betrayal, and of a woman who had finally found her wings. This was a story about the corrosive power of deceit and the unbreakable strength of a woman who refused to be silenced. Sophia's journey shows us that the truth, when wielded with intelligence and courage, is the most powerful weapon of all. She didn't just expose an affair, she dismantled a fortress of lies with an arsenal of facts. What did you think of her methods? Was her public unveiling an act of perfect justice or a step too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. These real-life dramas are happening all around us, often hidden behind closed doors. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength and vindication. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next story we uncover.